What if the loudest band in the room wasn't chasing noise? What if they were inventing a new language? Before stadium rock, before synth rock anthems, before punk's first sneer, there was The Who. They didn't just make songs, they rewired how rock moves, how it feels, and how it tells a story. Before today's festival rigs and arena-scale shows, 4 London mods turned the stage into a battlefield. Windmill chords, lead bass lines, drums like a storm. And then they did something almost unthinkable. They made rock narrative. Tommy, Quadrophenia, albums that played like films. But behind the legend is a story of bruised knuckles, broken gear, and a dream that nearly fell apart, more than once. Because innovation isn't clean, it's messy, it's expensive, it's dangerous. The Who fought crowds, fought technology, and sometimes fought each other. Keith Moon played like he was outrunning time. John Entwistle turned bass into a lead instrument and paid the price of being the quiet engine under a runaway machine. Pete Townshend kept pushing for a bigger idea. Rock as cinema. Rock as theater. And Roger Daltrey had to deliver it with a voice big enough to carry a generation's anger and awe. Across the next chapters, you'll see how a supposed synth loop in a living room organ became Baba O'Reilly, how wedges on a stage changed the way bands perform, how a mod coming-of-age tale called Quadrophenia still echoes in youth scenes today. We'll trace the shockwave, power pop hooks, punk velocity, arena spectacle, the blueprint others are still photocopying. Human cost, shift nor 2, 305 to 4 outward. But none of this came free. There were blown eardrums and blown chances. There were nights that ended in silence, and one night that ended in tragedy. Greatness asks for payment, sometimes from the wrong people. The Who's music is immortal. The bodies that made it were not. So this isn't just about a band. It's about how culture upgrades itself, through risk, through obsession, through failure, and the stubborn belief that sound can carry a story bigger than any one of us. If you've ever felt a chorus lift your chest, if you've ever watched a crowd become one voice, you've already met The Who's fingerprints. Here's the twist. The revolution didn't start with a manifesto. It started with a volume knob, a broken guitar, and a question nobody had asked yet. How big can rock be before it breaks? Chapter 1 begins where the shockwave started, on a stage that wasn't ready, and a band that didn't care. How The Who changed music, not just what you hear, but how you hear it. Let's go. In 1963 London, the radio felt small. The BBC's Light program rationed pop between safe dance band slots and novelty hits, while American R&B slipped in through late-night imports and pirate transmissions just offshore. Meanwhile, in real rooms, youth clubs, church halls, the marquee, the sound was louder, leaner, and impatient. Skiffle was giving way to raw R&B kids in sharp suits. Mods wanted volume you could feel in your ribs, not just a tidy tune to whistle on the bus home. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the streets were tense. Britain was still shaking off the gray of post-war life. Work was work. Class lines were real. Mods and rockers were clashing at seaside towns. Cheap scooters offered speed and style on a budget. If you were young and working class, music wasn't a backdrop. It was armor. It told the room who you were before you opened your mouth. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the ingredients. Roger Daltrey, Shepherd's Bush, metal shop apprentice by day, band builder by night, He forms the detours, because waiting for someone else's show is not an option. He's a practical leader with a switchblade of a voice, built for tight stages and louder rooms. John Entwistle, also West London, a brass band kid who loves melody and precision. He brings a musician's ear to a supposedly blunt instrument, bass, and starts wondering, why can't this sing on top? Pete Townshend, a sensitive kid with a head full of radio static and art school ideas. He's learning that feedback isn't just a mistake, it's a color. He experiments with chords like a designer testing stress points. How hard can a guitar hit before it turns into light? Keith Moon, the last piece to click in, all tom-toms and fireworks, obsessed with motion. He doesn't keep time, he tries to outrun it. He shows up from the Beachcombers with the energy of a drummer who thinks the song is a chase scene. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Before the legend, this was a survival story. The band burns through names, the detours, the high numbers, while managers Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp shove them toward stages that can barely contain them. The mod scene gives them a target. Play harder, dress sharper, make the promise bigger than the room. They start treating shows like tests of materials: wood, skin, wire, willpower. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, PA systems are primitive. Most bands rely on vocal columns. Amps are for the stage, not the building. But this group is already dreaming in arena scale. Entwistle and Moon want to feel it. Townshend wants to show it. Daltrey wants to cut through it. Answer: bigger amps, bigger cabs, and the nerve to push them beyond recommended use. Hold that sound in your head. Now add a small technical miracle. The crew, led by a young problem-solving engineer named Bob, starts shaping a new onstage ecosystem. What if the band could hear itself as clearly as the front row? Wedges on the floor. Monitors for truth. Suddenly, the group can play tighter at punishing volume. The stage becomes its own cockpit. The world before them made loud a bad word. The pieces before the legend turned loud into design. One night, the test becomes theater. A missed cue, a feedback scream, a smashed guitar, accident tilts into ritual. The audience doesn't just hear release, they witness it. The instrument is both machine and victim. The Who discover something dangerous. Destruction can be composition if you time it right. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, other bands still dress the part and play the set. This lot treats songs like structures to stress and break, stretching codas, detonating endings, turning 3 minutes into a living argument. The rhythm section flips gravity. Bass lines race ahead like lead melodies, while drums flood every open space. Guitar becomes the iron frame that holds the building up when the wind hits. Hold that sound in your head. Now add a document. A university hall in Yorkshire. A recording truck. No overdubs, no polite fixes. The live shockwave captured like a photograph that somehow breathes. Critics call it raw. Players call it terrifying. Fans call it the truth. What matters is the idea inside it. The stage itself can be art, not just a place to sell the record. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The spectacle, windmills, splinters, stacks like factory walls, wasn't decoration. It was an argument about scale. If real life felt small and contained, the show should feel like the opposite: risk, velocity, release. The audience didn't just watch, they participated. You could measure the night in broken sticks and ringing ears, true, but also in something harder to count: permission. After a Who gig, every band in town remeasured their limits. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, clubs are upgrading. promoters are calculating, and the gear industry is paying attention. Bigger amps become standard. PAs grow teeth. The band that wouldn't fit the room changes the room to fit the band. The world before them sounded tidy. The pieces before the legend were anything but. When those pieces locked, the stage changed into a proving ground, and rock learned a new language. Volume as architecture, energy as arrangement, spectacle as structure. Hold this thought for Chapter 2. If the stage could be a canvas, could the album be a film? The next move doesn't explode the guitar. It explodes the 3-minute single. In late '66, the room tilted. The band had already learned how to turn a club into a pressure cooker. Loud, risky, unforgettable. But Pete Townshend was chasing something stranger. Could a rock song behave like a scene in a film? The first time they tried it on stage, a quick one while he's away. A stitched-together suite with characters, reprises, and a payoff, people stopped talking. It didn't sound like a new act. It sounded like a new form, a joke title, a serious idea. Rock, built like theater. Freeze the frame, listen to the hook one more time. Not just verse-chorus. There are doors opening, motifs returning, emotions stacking. You don't need a playbill to follow it, your ears do the reading. That's the spark, the moment when The Who realize 3 minutes is a wall, and they can step through it. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, London moves fast. Pop is supposed to be candy. Bright singles, neat endings, on to the next. Critics call extended tracks indulgent. Managers count radio seconds like coins. But Kit Lambert sees the angle. He's the art school manager who knows that if you can explain a big idea simply, you can sell a big idea loudly. He nudges Pete. Go bigger. Write the thing they'll say can't be done. After a year of sketches and near misses, Townshend writes toward a character. Trauma, silence, awakening. A boy who can't see, can't speak, can't hear, but feels music as revelation. In 1969, Tommy arrives and embarrasses anyone who said the British rock scene was out of ideas. Critics hear pretension. The kids hear a door crack open. Pinball as faith. Feedback as scripture. The Who as a company of actors, not just a band. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Pinball wizard hits like a scene change. Acoustic strum like stage lights rising, then the band slams into motion, themes recurring like characters re-entering left. Roger sings with a narrator's clarity. Pete throws shapes, but the shapes mean plot. John and Keith don't accompany. They animate. Bass as inner voice, drums as weather. Even live, the structure holds. You can drop the needle anywhere and still sense the story's spine. And then the backlash landed. Some papers call it too grand, too theatrical, not real rock. They say narrative kills danger, but the Who's answer is kinetic. They tour Tommy like a rock ritual, not a polite recital. The stage is still a brawl, the amps are still a wall, and somehow, inside that storm, a story breathes. Night after night. The audience learns a new way to listen. Hooks aren't just for choruses, they're for characters. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the second breath. Lift off. If Tommy is the prototype, Quadrophenia, 1973, is the precision build. No fairy tale frame this time, no pinball metaphors. It's Britain. Wet streets and scooter engines, class tension and identity split 4 ways. Jimmy the Mod versus the world and himself. Musically, it's denser, sharper. Brass that remembers John's childhood bands, synth textures as tide, guitars carving granite lines while Keith turns toms into a train that never stops. The Real Me isn't just a single. It's Jimmy's Bloodstream recorded at 45 RPM. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, styles are fragmenting. Glam wants spectacle with a wink. Prog wants complexity with a cape. Singer-songwriters want confessional quiet. The Who choose a fourth path. Album as world. You don't consume it. You enter it. The booklet photos. The sea sound. The way 515 feels like a platform stuffed with bodies and noise. This isn't background music. It's urban cartography. You know the stations by feeling alone. Freeze the frame. Listen to that horn line one more time in 515. It's not decoration. It's narration. Jimmy's speed. Jimmy's confusion. Jimmy's need to belong. Told in brass and breath. That's the liftoff. When arrangement becomes storytelling. When rock stops asking, "What's the single?" and starts asking, "What's the world?" By now, the breakout sequence is undeniable. First a suite that shouldn't work but murders live rooms. Then an album-length opera that rewrites what a rock LP can carry. Then a second world. More grounded, more dangerous, that turns the mod past into a mirror for the present. Stages get bigger. Headlines shift from amplifier smashers to concept architects. The kids get it. The ones on scooters, the ones in denim, the ones who need music to be a map because the adults aren't giving them one. And, yes, the press keeps its teeth. Too loud. Too political. Too synthetic. Not real. But listen, the electronics are not a crutch. They're a set piece. The density isn't muddle. It's environment. The Who aren't abandoning rock. They're giving it dimensions. Front door, back alley, rooftop, sea cliff. You can love the choruses and still find your own corner in the mix. Hold that sound in your head. Now add bodies in a room. The Quadrophenia tour demands discipline. Click-locked sequences. Visuals before the word multimedia is cool. A band known for chaos learning to land a plane on instruments that still want to explode. Tension becomes texture. When it works, it's overwhelming. When it wobbles, you feel the ambition in your bones. Either way, the gamble is clear. If the stage can be art, the album can be cinema. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. This shift isn't Pete alone in a room. It's four identities arguing toward a single result. Roger gives story a chest and a face. He sells belief. John threads melody through concrete. He gives the cities inside the songs their streetlights. Keith refuses to play time, so the songs never feel locked in a museum. They breathe, they lunge, they bleed at the edges. And Pete, the architect, keeps walking into the burning building to see what's left to save and what wants to burn. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Play Love, Rain O'er Me. That opening isn't just weather, it's judgment. When the band arrives, it isn't a chorus. It's absolution delivered at full volume. Jimmy's crisis becomes a listener's purge. The Who's rock opera trick isn't plot with guitars. It's feeling with structure, the kind that carries you when words fail. And then the backlash lands again, because big moves attract big targets. But a funny thing happens outside the editorial pages. Young bands take notes. Power pop builders tuck Who-sized choruses into tight frames. Punk, supposedly the anti-opera, learns that identity is a narrative and anger needs arrangement. Even the late 70s mod revival finds its rally point in the cinema version of Quadrophenia. The kids heard the future, the papers heard a problem. History chose the kids. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, Record companies start budgeting like they believe albums can be worlds. Stage crews learn to route power like architects. Fans don't just ask, "Is it good?" They ask, "Where does it take me?" So, formation to detonation. A stitched suite becomes a door. Tommy blows it off its hinges. Quadrophenia builds the neighborhood behind it. That's the spark and the liftoff. The Who don't escape the single. They expand it until it can carry characters, weather, cities, and a generation's confusion. Hold this thought for Chapter 3. If a band can turn albums into worlds, what happens when they wire electricity into the pulse itself? Next, we step into the machine room where a home organ, a repeating pattern, and a band with fighter-pilot discipline invent a new future sound, long before most rock bands even knew the button existed. They weren't just selling music. They were selling permission. The Who gave kids a uniform, Target tees, sharp suits, scooters, and an attitude. Be loud in public and mean it. Parents complained about smashed guitars, school governors wrote letters, club owners braced for broken lights. But strip the tabloids away, and the secret weapon isn't destruction. It's design. It's the swing of Keith's cymbals, the iron-stamped downstrokes of Pete's guitar, John's lead melodic bass carving lanes across the mix, and Roger's voice opening the throttle at exactly the moment the room needs air. Freeze the frame, listen to the undercurrent in Baba O'Reilly. That hypnotic pattern isn't a synth solo. It's an electronic grid built on a repeating keyboard figure, tightened on tape, then played to with fighter-pilot discipline. The band locks to it without losing danger. That push-pull, machine pulse versus human surge, creates a feeling rock hadn't delivered at stadium scale yet. Trance and thunder in the same breath. Copycats learned the notes. They couldn't fake the nerve. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, radio programmers worry it's too electronic, and old guard critics grumble that repetition equals laziness. But inside the hall, the kids hear permission. You can be modern, loops, patterns, wires, and still swing like a wrecking ball. The look, the rumor, the bands, that's the myth engine. The craft is the reason it sticks. Solo the drums. Hear what's happening under the vocal. Keith Moon refuses the straight backbeat. He paints with toms, treats crash cymbals like punctuation, and turns fills into a second melody. What that does to the guitars is wild. Pete doesn't need to noodle. He hammers rhythm into steel beams so the song doesn't fall apart when the storm hits. And Entwistle? He climbs on top with bright, articulate lines, the lead bass idea, so the harmony moves while the guitar stays tectonic. Pull any one of them out, and the whole machine falls apart. One studio trick you can't unhear after this. The Who use sustained, filtered keys, not as decoration, but as architecture. In Won't Get Fooled Again, the long-held textures don't sit behind the band. They hold the roof up. The dropouts make the chorus feel bigger than the room. The filter sweeps tell your body when to clench and when to exhale. That's why the song feels inevitable when Roger hits the scream. It's not just performance, it's engineering. And that's where image meets craft. The smashed Rickenbacker, the windmill strum, the Union Jack target. These aren't random stunts. They're visual rhythm to match the musical rhythm. Pete's windmill isn't only for the photo. It's a timing device that lands those downstrokes like a pile driver. Roger's mic lasso isn't only bravado. It's a way to move air, so consonants cut through a battlefield of drums and amps. The fashion wasn't boutique cosplay. It was a uniform you could wear to work on Monday and to the gig on Friday. A blueprint kids copied because it solved a problem: how to be seen and heard. Freeze the frame, listen to the bass alone in The Real Me. The logic is inside the articulation. Clipped attacks for urgency. Singing sustains for lift. Slides for emotional punctuation. Producers loved John because his lines built bridges between sections without needing extra guitars or keys. He's the reason those big choruses arrive like a wave you knew was coming, and you still can't stop it. Culture shock follows the sound. Teen zines fill with scooter badges and parka spreads. Power pop becomes a phrase bands wear like a medal. Radio formats begin to accept longer intros because the audience wants the build. They want to live on that electronic pattern before the drums crash in. Club dance floors shift too. You can move to the Who not only on the snare, but on that ticking grid underneath. The modern heartbeat that pulls you forward, whether you're ready or not. Numbers don't tell it. This clip does. Cue Behind Blue Eyes, the calm before detonation. Hear the stacked harmonies, the choir that doesn't sound like a choir because the voices are rough enough to feel human. Then the flip. The band arrives in lockstep, not just louder, but wider. That width is arrangement. Guitars panned like wings, bass speaking in the center, drums filling the skyline. It's heavy music that still breathes. And then the backlash landed. The same papers that loved the early chaos now call the electronics a cheat. Too synthetic. Not real. But ask a lighting tech, a monitor engineer, a road crew from the 70s how real it is to keep a stadium show in sync with a repeating pattern, old tape machines, and manual cues. The Who prove you can run show control, precision monitors, and vast PAs without neutering the band. It isn't less human, it's more responsibility, the craft that lets risk survive at volume. Solo the guitar, hear the discipline. Pete strips harmony down to power chord geometry so the drums and bass can be acrobats without losing the floor. When he does add color, suspended chords, open-string drones, it isn't to decorate, it's to change the temperature in the room. That's why the attack feels cinematic without needing a symphony. Here's a studio detail hiding in plain sight. Those synths aren't always synths. Sometimes it's a home organ trick, abused and recorded like a machine. Sometimes it's real oscillators fed through filters until they breathe. The lesson is bigger than gear. Use repetition as a stage set, then let the band act inside it. That's why copycats never quite felt right. They treated the loop as a leash, not a landscape. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, fashions turn, and the press finds new heroes to crown and cut down. But kids keep the pieces that work. Target logos, big choruses, the idea that you can dress an identity and sound like one too. Punk inherits the permission to be loud without apology. Power pop inherits the chorus math. Arena rock inherits the scaffolding. Tight show control, big systems, repeatable impact. So the myth, danger, destruction, defiance, made the posters. The craft, patterns, placement, tone, and timing made the legacy. They turned repetition into suspense, electronics into muscle, and volume into architecture. That's why the tracks still land in gyms, movies, playoff highlight reels, and late-night playlists. The body recognizes a grid it can move to, and a voice that can cut through weather. Hold this thought for Chapter 4. If the machines built the stage set, who actually drove the show? Next, we solo the engine, bass and drums that flipped gravity, and a rhythm section so upside down it taught guitar to be the anchor and bass to be the spear. Behind the posters was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity. The rhythm section that reversed gravity, Entwistle's lead-like bass, and Moon's stormfront drums also reversed the normal costs. When your bass line is chaos, maintaining it takes more than talent. It takes a body that can pay. We're going to sit with this for a second. Grind math first. Endless tours, bigger rooms, louder rigs, nights that demanded a sprint from first bar to last. Labels want singles, managers want routes, crews want guarantees, and the audience wants the impossible, the shock you can schedule. The Who built a career on detonations. The machine that delivers those detonations does not sleep. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. Moon plays like he's outrunning time because, in life, he is. The tom-toms that sounded like freedom start to sound like a chase. On stage, he's fireworks. Off stage, he's falling through trapdoors, exhaustion, substances, the toll you don't see from the cheap seats. Entwistle is the counterweight, the calm surgeon of the low end, holding shape while the weather changes. That balance is the band's secret gear, and its pressure point. To keep the engine stable, John pushes himself into constant precision and constant work. Sessions, side gigs, the kind of financial gravity that pulls even the quiet ones back on the road when they should be home. This is the part fans don't put on t-shirts. Creative stalemates creep in. The band that turned albums into worlds now fights over which world to live in next. Pete's concepts grow more intricate. Practicality grows sharper teeth. Roger guards the center, song, voice, connection, against the sprawl. Arguments aren't just about notes, they're about oxygen. Who gets to decide how big The Who is allowed to be? Who carries the weight when ambition outruns the day? Hold that sound in your head. Now solo the cost beneath it. Moon's fragility becomes unavoidable. The very style that made him immortal, rolling thunder with no straight lines, demands a body that never lets up. Bodies let up. In 1978, the chemistry changes forever. Without Keith, it isn't just that a drummer is missing. The band's physics are broken. Guitar can no longer be only the anchor. Bass cannot always be the spear. The roles they invented for themselves, those daring inversions, suddenly require a different math. You can hire a timekeeper, you can't hire back a weather system. We're going to sit with this for a second. The next year adds a wound no rehearsal can heal. A concert where the crowd's hunger meets the building's failure, and people die. The stage is supposed to be sanctuary. It becomes a crime scene. The band plays on, not knowing, then learns what happened. Nothing about that night fits in a chorus. You feel the ripple for decades, in safety rules, in nerves, in the way a sound check can carry ghosts. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. The 80s arrive with new tools and new math. Clicks, cues, control. The Who try to be both who they were and who they must be to survive arenas wired like airports. Success is not the same as peace. Each decision, tour or pause, single or suite, reopens the same wound. What is The Who without the original engine, and who is allowed to say so? And yet, the grind doesn't stop. Bills don't care about myths. Entwistle, the oak at center field, takes on more shows, more output, more weight on a quiet back. The irony is brutal. The player who gave the band extra oxygen becomes the one who runs out of it. Another funeral, another recalculation. The legend hardens not because the band is nostalgic, but because time is ruthless. Most acts fade. The Who didn't fade. They detonated, piece by irreplaceable piece. Freeze the frame. Listen to the bass in The Real Me. Hear the drums in I Can See for Miles. Feel the sprint in A Quick One while he's away. Those are not just parts. They are identities. Pull Entwistle out, and the harmonies lose their spine. Pull Moon out, and the sky stops moving. Ask the guitar to cover both jobs, and you change the gene code. Ask the voice to carry the same weight, and you change the script. The very innovation that made them singular, bass as spear, drums as storm, made replacement a philosophical problem, not just a personnel one. We're going to sit with this for a second. Money splits, litigation, bruised friendships. The industry knives do their quiet work while the headlines chase the loud parts. But the real end is not a press release or a final show. It's the moment the risk engine stops being renewable. The Who can still be great. They cannot be that dangerous every night without paying the bill up front. And the bill has already been paid. Behind the posters was a price tag. Sleep, blood, sanity. One incident changed the chemistry. Several locked it in. The myth says gods. The tapes say men who dared an extreme and lived with its gravity. Hold this thought for Chapter 5. If the cost is that high, why does the music still rise when you press play? Next, we map the aftershocks. How the look, the language, and the long-form ideas outlived the bodies that made them, and why a 2025 listener can still feel the floor shake when that first pattern in Baba O'Reilly starts to breathe. They didn't just change songs, they changed the weather the songs lived in. Before The Who, British youth style sounded like tidy beat music and Sunday best suits. After them, everyone chased the crackle. Big choruses, sharper clothes, louder rooms, and the right to be seen. Even artists who've never studied a Who record are living in the echo. Power chords as a social language, stagecraft as storytelling, an album that behaves like a world you can walk into. Spot the lineage. Hear a modern arena act hit a downstroke chorus and hold the crowd on a single note. That's Townshend's blueprint. Watch a tight, melodic guitar band write hooks with teeth. That's the power pop DNA The Who helped define. Look at any mod revival. Parkas, targets, scooters. And you can trace a line back to the photographs, the film, and the feeling. Ordinary kids in extraordinary noise learning how to carry themselves. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, the afterlife never stopped. The band is inducted, reissued, remastered. The documentaries keep their faces fresh. The kids are all right, doesn't age, it accumulates. Reunion shows light up new generations. Charity gigs prove a stage can be a public service. Anniversary box sets unpack demos to show the architecture inside the thunder. Murals go up. Tribute nights sell out. And fan-made playlists turn into cult maps. Live cuts from Leeds and Hull. Deep tracks from the corners. The ballads that break you when you didn't expect it. Freeze the frame. Listen to the craft that keeps the myth alive. Riffs. The power chord grammar turns 3 or 4 shapes into a cathedral. Groove. Keith's rolling toms made motion itself a hook. Even drummers who play straighter now think in creates of energy, not just backbeats. Bass logic. Entwistle's lines climb and sing, giving choruses lift without more guitars. Modern producers still carve mid-range space to let that melody through the floor happen. Voice. Daltrey's cut is a masterclass in consonance and conviction. You can hear the words over cannons. Studio sleight of hand, repeating keyboard patterns as stage sets, sustained textures as architecture, stacked harmonies rough enough to feel human. One studio trick you can't unhear after this. Those synths often function like lighting cues. The tension release lives in the filter sweep more than the chord change. And that's why copycats never feel quite right. You can mimic the clothes, the feedback, even the windmill. But if the internal logic isn't there, bass as spear, drums as weather, guitar as iron spine, voice as flair, you've got the poster without the city behind it. Culture shock, then and now. In the late 60s and 70s, The Who gave kids a uniform and permission to be loud in public. By the late 70s, Quadrophenia helped catalyze a full mod revival. Zines, scooters, seaside rallies, bands who wrote like bruised romantics with perfect choruses. In the decades after, power pop becomes a banner for hooksmiths who value impact over ornament, while punk keeps the right to be unapologetically direct. Arena rock inherits the show control math. Big PAs, tight monitors, repeatable impact without killing spontaneity. Today you can hear the echo anywhere crowds gather to shout the same line at once. One sample you've heard 1,000 times? It's not always a literal lift, it's the feel. The pre-chorus that holds on a single chord while the drums boil. The intro that's basically a heartbeat on a loop before the band arrives. The final scream that lands like a verdict. Commercials, sports montages, film trailers keep returning to that emotional logic because it just works. Machine-human push-pull, then release. Why now? Why a 2025 listener hears more than 198x did? Because the modern ear is trained for patterns. We live with loops in our pockets, playlists, DAWs, TikTok beats, and The Who's repetition as suspense suddenly feels even more current. The identity questions at the center of Quadrophenia read like a group chat. Who am I in public versus private? How do I stay loud without losing myself? The live recordings don't sound old school. They sound like proof that unpredictability is the point. If you're starting today, take this map. Gateway single. I Can't Explain. The prototype, short, sharp, stylish. Gateway world. Tommy, enter the idea of Rocka's story. Then Quadrophenia, enter the city. Gateway live. Live at Leeds. Learn why a stage can be a canvas. 3-track sampler to feel the system. Substitute. Wit plus wallop. Baba O'Reilly. Pattern plus punch. Love, rain or me. Weather plus witness. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the human chain. You hear Who fingerprints in the muscular choruses of hook-driven rock, in mod-styled revivalists who polish their shoes and their guitars with equal care, in punk's insistence that volume is a right, not a crime. And in every band that treats the stage as both laboratory and altar. The lineage isn't neat, it's loud and alive. Personal handoff. If you were there, you already knew. If you weren't, now you do. They weren't just selling music. They sold permission. To be louder, sharper, braver. To build a world and live in it for 40 minutes at a time. To play like a storm without losing the map. Your turn. What was the first Who moment that hit you in the chest? The downstroke that snapped your head back? The harmony that felt like a door opening? Drop it in the comments. Your picks go in the pinned playlist, so the next person finds their way in through your gateway. This is rock lore. Subscribe, so this history doesn't get erased by the algorithm, and hit the next episode where we chase the ripple. Power Pop, the real origin story. How a 3-chord chorus conquered the world. And if you want the grittier route, jump to mods, scooters, and seaside riots. The Quadrophenia effect. Either path starts with a single downstroke. See you there. The journey doesn't end here, rock warrior. Watch this next.